It's probably one of the number one questions I get being a mom of 8 kids. And that question is, what on earth are y'all doing about college? And I can tell you, with 8 different kids, 8 different learning styles, 8 different ideas about what the kids want when it comes to their careers and all of the rest, college has been a big topic of conversation around here. Well, there is a university that I want you to know about because it just hits so many of the things that are really important when it comes to considering your kid's college education. George Fox University, it's the number 1 private school in Oregon. It's a Christian university. It's located in the heart of the Pacific Northwest. And what's so great is in addition to a top-notch education, students have the opportunity to grow and deepen their faith, and they can learn in this really pivotal time in their lives who God made them to be. I mean, let's face it. We need more people coming out of our universities who know how to be leaders and how to be leaders with character. And George Fox University offers more than 60 academic majors. And that includes a nationally recognized engineering program, a nursing program. It allows your student to pursue their passions and prepare for the calling that God has for them. And let's not forget about fun when it comes to college. George Fox University students have a great student life. There are weekly campus events, there's chapel, there's service opportunities. There are 23 NCAA Division III athletic teams. Here's something that is important to me. There's a study abroad opportunity. So if your student wants to go and experience life somewhere else for a semester, they can do that. There's outdoor recreation because, of course, we're talking about Oregon, so gorgeous. George Fox University could be just the perfect fit for your student as you are looking into college, career, and all that goes beyond. George Fox University, where your student will learn and thrive in the center of it all.
Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
The therapist said something to me that changed my entire life and perspective, and just in general about not just marriage, but relationships. And she said, if you want to make a better marriage, it starts by making a better you.
Hey friend, I wanted to give you a little heads up. Today I have Casey and Meygan Caston on. They have an incredible outreach to marriages called Marriage 365. This is going to be a 2-part episode. They were so generous with their time. I did want to let you know that we do speak pretty bluntly about some things in marriage, and so this might be one of those episodes that you want to put the headphones on for a little bit, just a little FYI, and I'll see you over at the episode. All right, friend, we talk a lot about parenting, about your faith journey, about work, about trying to balance all the things. And it's time for us to chat once again about some great ideas for your marriage, things that we're seeing that are trending, things that you learn along the way from early marriage to more, shall I say, mature marriage. This is the AllMomDoes podcast, and I'm your host, Julie Lyles Carr. We're part of the Purposely Podcast Network. And I am still so passionate. 8 seasons in. Woo! 8 seasons. We are still here and so excited to be with you as you navigate all of these seasons of your life with kids, with marriage, with work, with your spirituality. Today, I am so excited because I have some folks on who have some really unique insight on marriage. What makes it happy and healthy? What can take it down? The things you need to be aware of, the things you need to be investing in. Casey and Meygan Caston, thank you so much for being with me today.
Hey guys, we're excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. So tell the listener where you guys live in the world, kids, dog, all the stuff.
Okay, so we live in Orange County, California. We've been married 21 years. We've got 2 teenagers, a girl and a boy, and then we've got a cute dog that
Aussie Doodle.
We really love. He doesn't talk back.
No, he doesn't.
Yeah.
Doodle. Yeah.
An Aussie Doodle. Yeah. And
that was actually a perfect picture of our marriage because I wanted an Australian Shepherd.
I wanted a standard poodle.
So we figured out, let's find a blend of the two. Boom.
We compromised. We are more different than alike on so many topics, including even dog breeds. And so, life just keeps it spicy. And so
we were thinking win-win, actually.
Yeah, win-win.
See, I got my Aussie.
And I got my poodle.
There you go. See,
so somehow
everybody
the
wins.
dog ended up being more Aussie. We're not sure. Casey still got his way a little bit somehow in there. I don't know.
It happens. Sometimes 50-50, that's just a little bit of a myth there on a lot of things. So.
Yes. Yeah.
So tell me how the two of you began to really speak into this space of marriage, how that started for you. Because, honestly, this is an arena where I think some of us just fear to tread. We've seen people who, launch into the marriage space and they're going to do conferences, they're going to do this, that, and the other. And then it just feels like things kind of get really rough. We've seen other people who we thought had really solid marriages who have been mentors for us. That goes to pieces. I mean, we are really in a season where marriage, we all know it's just tough in general as part of life, but culturally, we seem to be struggling. So give me first some of the stats we need to know. And then secondly, I would love to know where you decided to dive in and tackle marriage.
Yeah, so our story started off in college. I was part of the freshman welcoming committee. Meygan was an incoming freshman, and I was like, hey, you need a private tour. And, we dated for 2 years, and it was a blast. I mean, it was so much fun. The walks along the beaches, everything, the high expectations and high hopes that if this is what life together would look like, we need to do this forever. And so we walked towards marriage, and I think we had all of the cultural expectations of love is all you need. And if it's true love, it shouldn't be too hard. I mean, obviously we were living proof of that through the dating years. And then we got married. And that was like a sucker punch. And what we had no clue was all of the woundings of our childhood past reared its ugly head. And it had everything to do with the expectations that we had over each other that you were going to make me happy. And when you didn't make me happy and you weren't there for me the way I expected you to be, even though I didn't communicate it,
right?
That's when all the anger and the rage came out. And it was a 3-year sprint towards the bottom where we got to a place where we hated each other, all the fighting. And we had no tools. We're very stubborn people. Yeah. Very competitive. And when we went to fighting, it was like, an all-out death match. And after 3 years, we were tired.
Yeah. So I really was pushing for the divorce. He wouldn't do it. And my best friend's like, listen, that's a huge decision. You need to go talk to somebody about that. Great advice, by the way, if that's what you're thinking. And I spoke with a therapist and she let me rant and rave about how horrible Casey was, him not being on the couch next to me because he refused to go to therapy or get any help.
I made fun of her on the way out.
Yeah,
out the door. I was like,
oh, there you go. You need therapy because you're crazy, right? And the therapist said something to me that changed my entire life and perspective and just in general about not just marriage, but relationships. And she said, if you want to make a better marriage, it starts by making a better you. And that really sat with me. And she goes, Casey's not here on this couch, but you are. And I can teach you communication tools. I can help you heal from your past. I can show you how to create boundaries with him. And that's exactly what she did. And for 13 months, I worked on our marriage by myself, a very, very lonely place to be. But at that point, Julie, I felt like, you know what, no matter what happens in my marriage, I am not living out my wedding vows. I didn't like who I had become at that point. I didn't want to yell at my husband. I didn't want to be the nag and the complainer. And I just knew I wasn't in a good place. And so I worked on me for me. I didn't change for Casey. I changed because I knew I needed to change. And what's amazing is when someone starts kind of setting new rules for the relationship, the other person almost in a way is kind of forced to change. And that's really what happened. And see, it was obvious at that point that he had now been the unhealthy one, where in the first 3 years, we were both so toxic, unhealthy, hurting, right? Hurt people. Well, I wasn't hurting anymore. So I wasn't hurting him. And he could feel that,
Yeah. And you were setting a boundary, not for me, actually. It was for yourself.
Correct.
And I thought that was really powerful because it became this like levee that like my rage came up against and bounced off of, where I would come at her with anger and rage and she would just say, this is not how we're going to talk any longer. And she set the standard for the relationship. So I'm really proud of Meygan. She became the hero of our story, but it was really like an influence over me. So if any of you are listening and you're thinking about creating boundaries for your relationship, it took some time. I mean, it definitely took some time.
I didn't do it once. And then he was like, whoa.
Oh, I get it.
I get it. Oh, it's all clicking, right?
But after a while, it really became obvious that I was the unhealthy one. And I think we're competitive enough where I was like, well, I'm going to out-health you. I'm not going to let you be the healthy spouse.
And then it took almost 5 years to rebuild. So we say 2 years to fall in love and get married, 3 years to destroy our marriage. But repair doesn't happen overnight. And then I just want to share, because I know you were asking about statistics, is, between both sets of our parents, there's 12 marriages.
Wow.
12.
Yeah. So my mom's on her 6th marriage.
Yeah. My dad's on his 3rd, and then there's some other marriages in there. But I would say that statistically, we've heard this stat is, 50% of marriages will end in divorce. Okay. Well, if you take the other 50%, how many of them are actually happy and thriving and communicating? Right. It's not the full 50%.
Right.
We also know that in second marriages, the divorce rate bumps up. It goes up in the 60%. They say somewhere around 60 to 63% is the divorce rate. Then it bumps up even more with third marriages. And so the thing is that people are feeling like the grass is greener somewhere else. And really our message to people, and what we've seen in working not just with our own story and other couples, is that when you actually stop focusing on what your spouse is doing or not doing, and you start focusing on you, it can shift the relationship, because two healthy people make a healthy relationship. And one of you has to start. And who do you have control over? You. That's it. And I tried every single way, Julie, to manipulate, give the silent treatment, withhold sex to get his attention. Like, you're the issue. But really, I had my own things that I needed to work on. And it's a message of really empowerment. It's very empowering when you start to work on yourself.
You can work on your relationship even without your spouse. It's kind of a new thought for a lot of people.
Pretty revolutionary, right?
Thinking, well, we have to work on our marriage together. But actually, there's a lot of science about how working on yourself and making a better version of yourself really does translate into making a better marriage.
Yeah.
I think that's really such an important point, because so often I think that, I've heard it, y'all have heard it, I'm sure the listener has heard it, that it's got to be this joint effort, that it takes two, all of these things. And there are truths to some of that. I mean, obviously I've seen people try to hang in a marriage where the other partner was not having it, and at some point, sometimes you have to let go, even as you're doing the intrinsic work on yourself. Mm-hmm. But there is something really powerful about saying, I'm going to be responsible for what I can be responsible for. It worries me a little bit. I love that we are becoming more versed in psychological terms, in different phenomenon we see in things. I love that people are talking more openly about being anxiously attached or avoidantly attached, all these things we throw around. But I also hear a lot of people throwing in words like, well, I know that my partner is a narcissist, and I know that this is happening, and I'm being gaslit. And we are throwing some of those terms around without actually clinically understanding what they mean. And I see people making relationship decisions based on, and I don't mean this in a rude way or any kind of arrogant way, but based on TikTok psychology. Yep. And the challenge to that is divorce is a big thing. Separating is a big thing. And we all know that sometimes it is necessary. But wow, I don't want to see people run into it. I'm not saying it's casually, but without a fuller context of what the cost is going to be. Meygan, you said something that I want to go back to, because this to me plays into understanding personal responsibility and growth. One of the terms that I think we also have really gotten mixed up in the blender of stuff is the term boundary. And I've seen it inverted in such a way that it means you partner are not allowed to do X, Y, Z, or else I will, or whatever. Mm-hmm. So talk to us about what a true, healthy, personal responsibility definition of boundary is, and why it's effective, even though it's not about trying to control the other person.
Well, you can't control the other person. That's the thing. And when you create a boundary, and I'm going to do air quotes here, I know you can't see it, and that's what so many women and men do, is they think they're creating a boundary in a healthy way because they saw it on TikTok or an Instagram post, or they read a blog. All great things, but boundaries are what you will and will not tolerate in your life. So you cannot tell someone, you can't do this to me. I mean, I guess you can say that, but you don't have any control over it. So let me give you an example. So for me, one of the boundaries was, I will not tolerate you yelling at me. So if you want to go yell this is to Casey. If you want to go yell, you want to go rage, whatever, I can't stop you. Literally, you cannot stop your husband. You cannot stop your wife from doing these things. But you don't have to tolerate it for yourself. So that's what a boundary is. What you will and will not tolerate. What kind of behaviors, words, actions that you're like, this now impacts me in a negative way, or this makes me feel unsafe, or I don't want my children to think that this is an okay behavior in a marriage, in a loving, committed relationship. That's what a boundary is. Now, here's the other thing that we always say. Never create a boundary out of fear and an unforgiveness. Mm-hmm. Because if you have a lot of hurt or a lot of fear, they're fear-based boundaries, that typically becomes very like rigid.
And unrealistic.
Yeah. And you want to actually do it at a place of love. Because listen, that boundary so Casey and I used to yell at each other. And my therapist was like, listen, you don't have to take that anymore. And so, I mean, I don't know if you want to share the story, but it's such a good story of that boundary that I put up when you were yelling at me.
Yeah, I came in the room. My face is all red. I'm about ready to explode on her. She could see it, me walking in. And she stood up. She came to me. She almost like spoke in a spa voice, right? She's like, I can tell you're upset, and I really want to hear what you have to say. Why don't you go outside, take a walk, calm down. Or I don't know, you said calm down. Excuse me. You said, take a walk outside, come back inside, and then we're going to sit on the couch, and I want to hear everything you have to say. So she wanted to talk to me. She was going to do it in a different way, and she even gave me some sort of action. I'm like, go walk outside and come back in. And that was like very different than the engagement style we had before, which was very toxic. We would blame, criticize, cuss each other out. I mean, it was really, really bad.
So I did that for several months where I would, sometimes he wouldn't listen. He'd be like, I don't need to calm down, right? Because that's realistic that someone that's angry or triggered or emotionally flooded.
Right.
The boundary is for you. So then sometimes I'd have to say, okay, well, I don't think that we should yell at each other anymore, because here's the thing, Julie, the boundary is for me too. Like, I don't think that he deserves me yelling at him either. Right? It's a two-way streak here. We both deserve respect. And so I would say things like that too. And so that's really what a boundary looks like in marriage. So I would have to sometimes walk away and say, hey, I want to talk to you about this. It seems like we're upset or we're yelling at each other, and we deserve better than that. Let's take a break, come back to it. And that's, and when someone's hurting, you can really separate yourself from what they're saying and what they're doing. This actually has nothing to do with me. They're triggered right now. And that's all part of the process of working on yourself and having confidence and awareness.
I just love that you bring up that the principle that you set as a boundary about how you want to be treated also has to be the principle by which you treat your spouse. Because I've certainly seen people, again, under a misunderstanding of what a boundary is, not make it equal on both sides, and not be thinking about that. The other thing that you pointed out that I really want to highlight, Casey, you talked about that she was using words like I want us to be able to talk about this. Mm-hmm. I don't think we're in a place. Why don't you take a pause, take a beat, go take a walk? She wasn't cutting you off. No. I think sometimes what I hear in boundaried language is, if you speak to me like that, I will not speak to you. And you do sometimes when someone's triggered or upset, or this is what was modeled for them, they don't have another option on the menu. Or if they're triggered, their brain in that heightened state is only like, I only have door A or door B. I don't, And so for someone to be willing to say, here are some options about how we can communicate. And you're important to me. I want to connect with you. Yeah. I just need us to connect in a way that isn't so heightened. Mm-hmm. Those are some beautiful elements that I don't think we often hear teased out when we talk about boundaries. And Casey, it sounds like to me, boundaries didn't end up being offensive to you. They ended up being a guidepost.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, during conflict, so I've got abandonment wounds. So during conflict, I'm already terrified of it because I feel like you're in opposition to me and there's no connection there. Right. So in the midst of this conflict, Meygan is actually reaching out and saying, I love you. I want to hear from you. Whoa, that's different. Usually I say something and she's like, you're wrong. You're this. Like we're attacking each other. And we always kind of talk about how communication moves to conflict. But then if you don't have tools for conflict, you move into combat. And the combat is just, let's use these tactics to overwhelm our enemy over here. And here Meygan was actually inviting me back to let's move into a healthy state of communication, but just, we're not going to tear each other down. And that to me was a massive change.
Yeah, there's a lot of phrases to use. Yeah, I language, we language. I miss you. I enjoy talking to you. We can do this so much better. I really want to hear what you have to say. Oh my gosh, this is what we're going to do on Saturday. We're going to sit down. We're going to talk about this. But we both deserve respect. We both deserve to be heard and listen and validate. We both, we language, I language goes much better when you're creating a boundary.
I only get this imagine of like Beauty and the Beast, me like raging, rah, rah, and then you like just gently put your hand up as I'm like snarling and just like bring that calming presence. And I think that Meygan moved into a place of confidence, out of insecurities into a place of confidence where she could stand in front of me snarling and still reach out and provide that spa voice. Because I think the TikTok psychology is just throw this out without going through the hard work of the heart work of moving and working through your hurts, because that's hurt people, right? And so in those moments that I'm snarling, I'm just a hurting person and I don't know how to express myself. But once I walked through and actually did the work to heal some of the wounds that I was going through, then we could move to a place where I could communicate in a healthy way.
Right. Talk to me about, I love this distinction of conflict and combat. And one of the mythos that I've seen surrounding marriage, particularly faith-based Christian marriages, is this notion that there should never be conflict. And I don't know how we got there, but y'all are like, yep, you've heard it too.
Yep.
That somehow the only healthy marriage is a marriage in which there is no conflict. The distinction between conflict and combat I really like, because I know that it for some people, depending on the backgrounds they were raised in, conflict can feel like combat, even if it's not.
Yeah.
For others, they don't even understand they've run headlong into combat because combat is the only thing they've ever known. So how do we frame what it means to have healthy conflict? How can we know we're moving into combat? Is there such a thing as a non-reconcilable conflict? I mean, like give the listeners some places to hang on to in all of that soup.
Well, I think this should be comforting to know that science and research has proven that 69% of conflict is inevitable.
Did you just make that number up, babe?
No, it's actually backed by the Gottman Institute. They have done the research. So knowing that the reality is that conflict is actually normal and healthy in a relationship. So I'll start with communication and kind of branch into conflict of how that happens. And then Casey can move into conflict and combat. But so you're sitting there, you're talking as a couple, that's communication, right? Whether you're talking about logistics or dreams about the future, you're on a date night, whatever. What happens when communication turns into conflict is there's a differing of opinion. I didn't feel heard. That didn't land well. Your tone seems snarky. Okay. So now that there's a rupture is what we call it. There's a rupture. Something didn't land well between the couple, whether that is only one person's feeling it or both people are feeling it. Now we're into conflict. Because if you're sitting there and Julie, you and I are talking, and then all of a sudden we have two completely different views about a subject, there's going to be some conflict. Oh, wait, you think this? Well, I think this. But if you have conflict resolution skills and you know how to listen with empathy, you know how to make validating phrases, you learn how to restate things like, so what I hear you saying is this, it's actually never going to probably move into combat. So then now, Casey, you can talk about when conflict turns into the combat.
Yeah. Well, and I just want to say that true maturity is the ability to have two divergent thoughts, and you can hold them. I can hold the pro view and the anti view at the same time and understand each other's perspectives. But the year is 2024, 2025. We just went through a really tumultuous election cycle. And what we're realizing as a culture is we're having a hard time holding two divergent thoughts at the same time.
Right.
Through the last 4 or 5 years, we've gone through several societal issues where people are either on one side or the other. And we're seeing that happen in marriage now, is we do not know how to, I have a different approach than you have a different approach. And now we're in conflict because we don't see, there's no synergy happening. So we kind of take sides. Okay. And if we take that personal, that's when we actually move into a place of combat, because I'm right and you're wrong.
Yep. We call it right fighting. We were really good fighters.
Right.
We both were really, we get an A+ and we know how to do right fighting, where we go into a conversation and it's like, I just want you to know that I'm right.
But Julie, I want you to know, I fully believed in what you just espoused, that conflict is terrible.
Yeah.
Like, we should just all find unity under the flag of Jesus. And shouldn't we, like, we're going to go to church and we're going to be all great and everything should be happy. And we lived that out during the dating years. So when we got married, it was like, why am I've never been an angry person. Now here I am, an angry person, and you don't, see eye to eye. Here's the reality, Julie. Meygan and I are more different than we are alike. So of course we're going to have conflict.
And can you say, Casey, would you agree to this? Because he's more of the fighter, like, fight and flight.
Right.
He's more of an avoider. I've seen this with our couples we coach, and I don't know, but I'm not an avoider. Do you think avoiders, they look at conflict as like the big, yucky, terrible thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't want to deal with it. Or hopefully if I just want to keep the peace, we'll just ignore it. Why would we bring up conflict?
Yeah.
To an avoidant person, that is like self-sabotage. That's pulling the pin on the grenade and sitting on it.
Where I'm like a fighter and I'm like, well, let's just deal with it and let's just move forward. Like, it might be kind of yucky, but then like at least we can get over it. And so then we move into combat. And just to give very specifics, combative behavior now is, it's hurtful. It has long-lasting damage. So some examples: gaslighting, yes. Blame, shame, the silent treatment. Just flat out, you're living with someone under the same roof and they don't acknowledge you. Now, to clarify, I always want to give this caveat because this is important. There's one thing in needing space and time to process and calm down.
Right.
That is not silent treatment.
Right.
That is, we call it like an adult timeout.
Right.
Sometimes we need.
Sometimes we just need an adult timeout, right? That's a parenting tactic. Because mama just needs a little break for a second. But the silent treatment is purposefully withholding love, affection, and acknowledgement. That's just pure mean.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think a lot of people kind of mesh those together, and they're very different.
Some other things are like cussing each other out, using strong language, elevating our voice and our tempo. Sometimes our goal is really to overwhelm our foe is really what it is. We're now in, I'm going to destroy you and use words to bring you down.
And we're emotionally flooded. We're hurting. And another thing that Casey and I have seen, and we just talked about this with our own community, but toxic texting.
Ooh. Interesting. Oh, I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
You're right. That is another portal.
Yep. When you were dating your husband, when we were dating, texting wasn't a thing yet. So we never had to deal with that. But this is something where now couples are, an example would be sending 30 text messages, just bombarding them with you're a piece of and da-da-da-da-da. Or like taking screenshots of texts they've sent and be like, look,
in the past,
you said this 5 years ago. I knew you weren't over it. But using texting as a way.
We've seen the screenshots, ladies and gentlemen.
We've seen the screenshots and the conversations, but that's become a massive issue with couples too, is combative texting. Yeah.
That is, I had not even, the minute you said it, it was like, bing. I mean, of course. And for couples who have been through the dating process and are newly married today, texting has probably long been one of their avenues of communication, probably baked in from the start. So yes, of course, the healthy things in their communication style are going to find their way into that texting stream, but also the things that are unhealthy are going to make their way into that texting stream. You brought up gaslighting, and that's one of those words we see thrown around that, again, sort of like the difference between taking a pause and the silent treatment. With gaslighting, I think it's really important to highlight that this is when somebody is intentionally lying to you about something that they know went down differently, which is different than each of you having a different memory, a different recall about how things happened. One of the things that you brought up was that the two of you if somebody were to look at it on paper, would you even really be considered compatible? We have put a whole lot of value on what we consider to be compatibility. Unpack all that. Tell me the myths about it. Tell me the truths of some of it. Talked about that.
Well, Meygan and I are, I think, obviously opposites attract, because it's something different about the person that we find novel, we find interesting. I mean, if we dated a carbon copy of ourselves, it wouldn't be very fun.
It would be very boring.
Yeah. Well,
but then
for me, it would be a lot of fun and a lot of noise, but probably wouldn't get anywhere.
But then when you get married, right, you're like, those differences, you're like, why aren't you doing things exactly the way that I do them, right?
Right.
Because when we were dating, I loved Casey's spontaneity. He's very spontaneous. And I'm very structured, type A, organized. And so I just thought it was fantastic when we were dating. Well, now that there's bills and children and whatnot, I'm like, why don't you have a plan? Why don't you just have structure like I do, right? And so, but if you look at that, it's the beautiful balance, because yes, if I had married another type A structured person, man, we wouldn't have a lot of fun and spontaneity. And then imagine if you married another spontaneous type B person, the bills would not be paid.
Yeah,
nobody could find the checkbook. Yeah.
I think here is the distinctive, off the cuff, I would say, does it matter if they're compatible? Maybe, maybe not. The key thing that couples need to do is they first need to bring awareness of their differences and understand the dynamic. So even if black or white, here's the differences: spender, saver, outgoing, introvert. What's some other ones?
Well, type A, type B.
Yep.
Yeah. Dreamer, realist. Or optimist,
realist.
Yeah.
But just to really draw that out. And then here was the key for Meygan and I, is now not only to appreciate, but then to operate out of our strengths.
Yeah.
So when we're looking for a plan and structure, we're going to go turn to Meygan. Okay. When we're looking for
vacation,
we want to do
travel,
something fun, we're going to turn to Casey. Right. So we learn how to operate in those strengths, and we appreciate. And in fact, if anything, there's a culture of admiration and appreciation verbally about, thank you for being so organized, Meygan. So we actively appreciate those differences. That right there brings down any of the why aren't you doing it my way kind of attitude.
It's still going to be a struggle and a frustration. Sure. But let me say this. I have to throw this in there. We would say, because we do a lot of premarital counseling and we have a premarital course. And one of the things we talk about is you do want to make sure that you have some shared values, like core belief systems.
Right.
So for example, like our faith, like we both were raised in the church. We both love God. That is a huge common thing that we have that drives a lot of our decisions, right? That we go to church on Sundays, we read our Bibles together, we raise our children in a Christian home. So now, whether you're religious or not, there are some certain core beliefs it's ideal to have in common. And that can be even like, for another one that we actually do have in common is we are both extroverts and we both like to have fun. So that has really been great, because even in the midst, Julia, of us and all of the bad that we went through, one thing we've always had and never really struggled with is having fun together, because we both value that, though. That's one of those things we actually have in common, dance parties, 11:30 at night. Seriously. Like we just had one 3 nights ago. We were cracking up and it was like, we should probably be going to bed, but like we just had like this great 90s playlist on and we were rocking it.
This conversation with Casey and Meygan Caston has been so rich. We just kept it going. So this is actually going to be a 2-parter. You've just listened to part 1. I want to invite you to check out AllMomDoes.com, AllMomDoes on the socials. I love to hear from you over on Instagram. I'm Julie Lyles Carr, all the places. And be sure and come back next time for part 2, where we go even deeper into a lot of things about marriage, what marriages are facing today, tools that can really give you hope, tools that can help you, even if you feel like marriage has gotten really, really hard. So be sure and check that out next week. And I'll see you next time on the AllMomDoes podcast.